"Sir, I need you to stand up." The words sliced through the first-class cabin, sharp and sudden, like a wire pulled taut, then snapped. Marcus Reynolds looked up from his laptop. His fingers still hovered over the keyboard, mid-sentence in an email he'd been composing about tomorrow's board meeting. The flight attendant stood before him, smile practiced, eyes detached. Behind him, a white woman in an ivory Chanel suit had already placed her hand on the seat divider, as if the space were hers by birthright. No explanation offered. The command was written in posture, in the tilt of her chin, in the way she refused to meet his eyes directly. "This passenger is a platinum member," the attendant said, voice smooth as silk drawn across a blade. "There's been a seat reassignment. Heads turned throughout the cabin. A few phones lifted discreetly. Marcus glanced at the boarding pass on his screen. 1A, reserved 4 weeks ago, confirmed 3 times. The silence around him thickened, heavy as the pressure change before turbulence. He drew a slow breath, steady but constricted, anger burning low in his chest, like coals banked for later use. Then he stood. No argument, no scene. Only his gaze remained, cold, direct, cataloging every detail. Marcus had boarded without fanfare. No entourage, no designer luggage, just a black backpack and a carry-on he'd rolled through the terminal himself, stopping at a Hudson News for a bottle of water and the Wall Street Journal. He'd smiled at James when scanning his boarding pass, a genuine smile, the kind he offered everyone regardless of their position. James barely glanced up. His eyes skimmed Marcus's face with the cursory attention reserved for people who don't register as important, then the boarding pass, then flicked toward the rear of the aircraft. "Premium economy is that way, sir." Marcus pointed to the seat assignment on his phone. "I'm in 1A. James's brow furrowed. Not confusion, but skepticism. He turned to a younger attendant restocking the galley. "We have a situation here. Not a discrepancy. Not a question. A situation." The cabin atmosphere shifted perceptibly. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A businessman in 2C lowered his Financial Times. A woman in 3A stopped scrolling her tablet. Marcus maintained a neutral expression, though he knew exactly what they were thinking. He could feel the weight of their assumptions settling over him like a familiar coat he'd worn too many times. They always try to sneak into first class. James returned, his professional smile pulled tighter across his face. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside so we can continue boarding other passengers. I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant, please." James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He walked toward the cockpit without acknowledging the request. Marcus stood in the aisle, backpack still on his shoulder, boarding pass displayed on his phone. Around him, passengers settled into their purchased comfort, unfolding newspapers, adjusting noise-canceling headphones, ordering pre-departure champagne. An older woman with pearl earrings and a Hermes scarf shook her head as she passed, lips pursed. Not in sympathy, in disapproval. A man whispered something to his wife. She nodded, expression pinched with vindication. Marcus had encountered this pattern before, in boardrooms where he was the only black face at the executive table, at conferences where attendees assumed he was technical support rather than the keynote speaker, in hotels where clerks asked, always politely, always with plausible deniability, if he was certain about his reservation. The script was old, predictable, exhausting in its consistency. But he wasn't exhausted today. He was observing, recording, preparing. He noted James's body language, the defensive posture, the averted gaze, the tight set of his shoulders, the whispers spreading through the cabin like ripples in disturbed water, the time displayed on the bulkhead screen, 6:47 p.m. They were already 17 minutes behind schedule, and he noted the woman approaching from the jet bridge, tall, blonde, mid-50s, carrying a Bottega Veneta briefcase that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She walked past him without acknowledgement, heading directly toward seat 1A with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned about where she belonged. Marcus watched her sit down and immediately summoned James with a slight gesture. He didn't say a word, because he knew something they didn't. Horizon Airways didn't just want Nexus Corps' business, they needed it. Their entire operational infrastructure was being migrated to his company's cloud platform. Flight scheduling algorithms, real-time fuel optimization, automated baggage routing, crew coordination systems. The contract had been negotiated for 9 months, with integration teams working around the clock. The system was scheduled to go live in 72 hours, and Marcus Reynolds controlled the master switch. But standing here in the aisle, he was just another black man being told he didn't belong in a space he'd paid for. The lead flight attendant appeared, an older man with silver hair and a name tag that read Thomas, more experienced than James, more polished in his approach. He moved down the aisle with practiced authority. "Good evening, sir. I understand there's some confusion about your seating assignment." Marcus unlocked his phone and displayed his boarding pass. "No confusion on my end. That's my seat." Thomas studied the screen with deliberate care, scrolled through the reservation details, then handed the phone back. "The system shows that 1A was reassigned this morning due to an operational priority. We've upgraded your premium economy seat to our premium plus cabin as compensation." "Reassigned to whom?" Thomas hesitated, his professional mask flickering briefly. "I'm not at liberty to disclose other passengers' information. The decision was made at the corporate level." Marcus let the silence stretch between them. Every passenger within earshot was listening now, some openly, others pretending absorption in their devices while tracking every word. He could feel them waiting, expecting him to become the angry black man, to validate their assumptions, to make this easy for them. He wouldn't. "What is Horizon Airways' policy regarding seat reassignments?" Thomas's smile held, though something tightened around his eyes. "We reserve the right to adjust seating based on operational requirements and customer priority status." "What specifically qualifies someone for priority status?" "That's determined on a case-by-case basis by our operations team." Marcus nodded slowly, as if processing this information for the first time, rather than recognizing it as the bureaucratic doublespeak he'd anticipated. He looked past Thomas toward seat 1A, where the woman in the Chanel suit had already reclined, champagne flute in hand, scrolling through her phone with the ease of someone who had never been questioned about their right to occupy space. Then he looked back at Thomas. "Thank you for clarifying the policy." He turned and walked toward the rear of the aircraft. Thomas visibly relaxed, satisfied that the situation had been resolved without incident. What he didn't see was the cold calculation in Marcus's eyes as he reached row 18. What none of them saw was the decision crystallizing in his mind with absolute clarity. Thomas turned away, allowing himself a small exhalation of relief. James stood near the galley, arms crossed, watching Marcus with barely concealed satisfaction. The boarding process resumed its rhythm, passengers filing in, overhead bins slamming shut, the low hum of voices settling into routine comfort. Marcus lowered himself into seat 18C, worn fabric instead of leather. A third of the legroom he'd paid for, a seat that had clearly served thousands of passengers before him. He set his backpack in the space beneath the seat in front of him, opened his laptop, and resumed working. His expression revealed nothing, but his mind was cataloging everything with a systematic precision that had made him one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs under 40. The woman in 1A, he would learn her name soon enough, had made herself thoroughly comfortable. Suit jacket hung on the provided hook, champagne refreshed without her having to ask. She was on a phone call, voice carrying with the unconscious volume of someone accustomed to being heard. Thomas leaned toward James at the front of the cabin, voice low but not quite low enough. "Corporate priority request. Last-minute VIP. Nothing we could do about it." James nodded, his expression shifting from defensive to sympathetic. The narrative was being constructed in real time. Not discrimination, just logistics. Marcus's inbox showed 4 new emails from Diana Westbrook, CEO of Horizon Airways. Excited for Monday's signing ceremony. Your team's integration work has been exceptional. Looking forward to our partnership. He didn't open them. Instead, he pulled up Horizon's comprehensive file in Nexus Core's internal database. 9 months of complex negotiations. A platform designed to replace their catastrophically outdated infrastructure, systems so fragile that a single point of failure could ground their entire fleet and cost millions per hour in losses and reputation damage. His CFO had flagged concerns during the due diligence phase, multiple complaints filed with the DOT, quiet settlements, patterns of discriminatory behavior that formed a clear picture when examined collectively. Marcus had pushed forward anyway, believing that meaningful change came through partnership and engagement rather than isolation and judgment. He was reconsidering that philosophy. The woman in 1A stretched into the space that should have been his, occupying it with the casual entitlement of someone who had never had to fight for recognition. She was still on her call, voice projecting across the cabin. No, I made my position absolutely clear. These diversity initiatives are destroying merit-based advancement. We can't just promote people because of how they look. These people. Marcus's jaw tightened incrementally, but his face remained carefully neutral. He had learned years ago, painful lesson after painful lesson, that visible anger was a luxury denied to him. Not in boardrooms, not on airplanes, not anywhere his reaction could be weaponized as evidence of exactly what they expected from someone who looked like him. So he sat motionless, observed, waited. Thomas reappeared with a tablet, scrolling rapidly, frown deepening. He moved toward the cockpit with more urgency than before. 2 minutes later, he emerged and walked directly to 1A, leaning down to speak quietly to the woman in the Chanel suit. She looked up, visibly annoyed, gestured dismissively. Thomas straightened and retreated. But Marcus had seen the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the tablet edge, the brief moment where his professional composure cracked. They knew, not everything, not yet, but something had begun to register as wrong. A passenger 3 rows ahead, a young black woman in a tech company hoodie, glanced back at Marcus. Her eyes widened with recognition, not of his face specifically, but of the situation, the quiet humiliation, the invisible architecture of diminishment. She nodded once, barely perceptible. Marcus returned the gesture. The engines ignited with a deep rumble that vibrated through the airframe. The captain's voice filled the cabin, welcoming everyone aboard and promising an on-time departure despite their delayed boarding. Marcus fastened his seatbelt and opened a new email draft. Subject: Protocol Omega. Standby mode. Initiate comprehensive audit of Horizon Airways contract. Suspend all integration access pending ethics compliance review. Hold system deployment until further notice. Prepare termination documents. He read it 3 times, checking for any ambiguity. Then he deleted it. Not yet. He wanted them to feel secure first, to believe they had successfully managed the situation, to relax into the assumption that he had accepted his place. The aircraft began taxiing toward the runway. James moved through the cabin, performing the final seatbelt check. When he passed row 18, his gaze slid over Marcus without acknowledgement. Didn't ask if he needed anything. Didn't offer the courtesy extended to passengers in the front cabin. Just kept walking. Marcus leaned back and closed his eyes. He thought about every conference room where he had been the only person who looked like him. Every time his voice had been talked over, his ideas dismissed until a white colleague repeated them verbatim. Every time he had been stopped by security in buildings where he held executive positions. Every hotel lobby where desk clerks had questioned his reservations. Every assumption that he was the help rather than the executive. Every time he had smiled through it, played the long game, proven himself twice as competent just to be perceived as half as capable. Patience, he had told himself repeatedly, was a form of strategic power, But sitting in row 18 in the downgraded seat, listening to this woman explain why people like him didn't deserve advancement, Patience felt uncomfortably close to complicity. The aircraft turned onto the runway. Through the window, the terminal lights receded into gathering darkness. Marcus pulled out his phone one final time before activating airplane mode. His thumb hovered over the send button, and he pressed it. The aircraft leveled at cruising altitude 35,000 feet above the darkened landscape. The seatbelt sign blinked off, releasing passengers into the illusion of freedom within their metal tube. In first class, James moved through the aisle with heated towels and pre-dinner beverages, his attention warm and solicitous for each occupant. When he reached seat 1A, he paused with particular deference. "Ms. Langford, can I bring you anything else before dinner service?" Victoria Langford. Now Marcus had a name to attach to the face. Victoria dismissed him with a slight wave. "The menu in a few minutes will be fine." James nodded and continued forward. Marcus watched from row 18, his laptop open but his full attention fixed on the careful choreography of deference unfolding in the premium cabin. The invisible lines that divided the aircraft into hierarchies of human worth. Thomas appeared from the galley, tablet in hand, and approached Victoria's seat. He leaned in, voice pitched low, shoulders slightly hunched in unconscious submission. Marcus couldn't hear the specific words, but body language communicated clearly. Apology, deference, careful management of someone important. Victoria looked up, irritation flickering across her carefully maintained features. She said something sharp, gestured toward her briefcase, then returned her attention to her phone. Thomas straightened and retreated toward the galley. A moment later, he walked down the aisle toward Marcus. Marcus didn't look up until Thomas stopped directly beside seat 18C. "Mr. Reynolds." Thomas's professional mask remained intact, but micro-expressions betrayed stress, the way his fingers pressed too hard against the tablet, the slight tremor at the corner of his mouth. "I wanted to follow up regarding your seat assignment. I've personally reviewed your original booking. You did reserve seat 1A 4 weeks ago. Unfortunately, due to operational priorities, it was reassigned. We've upgraded your Premium Economy seat to Premium Plus as compensation." Marcus let silence expand between them. Passengers in nearby rows leaned in slightly, abandoning any pretense of privacy. "You mentioned operational priorities. Could you define what that means specifically?" Thomas's smile tightened microscopically. "Certain passengers receive priority accommodation based on their relationship with Horizon Airways or the nature of their travel requirements. What criteria qualify someone as priority?" The script Thomas had been provided clearly hadn't anticipated detailed questioning. "That's determined on a case-by-case basis by our corporate operations team. So not based on fare class or reservation timing, purely discretionary." "That's correct, sir." Marcus nodded slowly, as if absorbing this information, rather than having understood the exact mechanism from the moment James first questioned his boarding pass. "And who makes these discretionary decisions?" Thomas shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. "Our corporate customer relations division in consultation with senior management." "I see. Thank you for that clarification." Marcus paused, then added, "I'd like Horizon Airways' written policy on seat reassignments, specifically the documented criteria for priority determinations." Thomas blinked, clearly unprepared for this request. "I don't have that information available currently." "That's fine. I'll request it through official channels after we land." Something flickered in Thomas's expression, confusion transitioning into nascent alarm. He recovered with forced cheerfulness. "Of course, sir. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Marcus smiled with careful neutrality. "No, thank you. You've been very informative." Thomas retreated up the aisle. Marcus returned his gaze to his laptop screen, though he wasn't actually working. He was watching, calculating, preparing the next move. Victoria had reclined her seat to its full horizontal position, shoes removed, feet extended into space that Marcus had paid identical money to occupy. She was recording voice memos into her phone, volume calibrated for everyone nearby to hear. "Michael, it's Victoria. Following up on the Denver acquisition. I shut down their counteroffer immediately. You know how these second-tier executives operate. One successful quarter, and suddenly they think they belong in serious negotiations. I had to remind the CEO that relationships and reputation matter more than quarterly earnings in this industry." She paused, scrolling through messages, then continued. "Actually, it reminds me of that technology conference in Austin last month. Some startup CEO, also black, mid-30s, gave this presentation about disrupting traditional business models and eliminating unconscious bias. Kept talking about systemic barriers and institutional racism." Victoria's laugh carried sharp edges. "I approached her during the networking reception and explained very diplomatically that this industry operates on trust and proven relationships. She didn't appreciate the feedback naturally. They never do." The passenger beside her, an older man with expensive cufflinks and a Rolex, made a small sound of agreement without looking up from his tablet. Marcus's phone vibrated silently. A text from Amanda Torres, his general counsel. Pulled the complete files on Horizon. 7 discrimination settlements in the past 24 months. 4 involving black passengers removed from first class. Multiple crew complaints on record. Doty opened preliminary investigation last year. This is a documented pattern. Marcus typed his response. Timeline for Protocol Omega full activation? Amanda's reply appeared within seconds. System already locked and encrypted. Their scheduling AI is inaccessible. Cloud access terminated. They won't discover it until they attempt system access on the ground. Estimated time until operational impact. 90 minutes. Marcus set his phone down and exhaled slowly, carefully. 4 rows ahead, the young woman in the tech hoodie had her phone positioned at a specific angle. Marcus couldn't see her screen from his position, but he recognized the posture, the deliberate casualness, the careful documentation of injustice unfolding in real time. Victoria continued recording voice memos, her tone shifting from condescending to openly contemptuous. "The fundamental problem with these diversity initiatives is they advance people beyond their actual competence level, and then everyone is expected to pretend it's working effectively." She shook her head, amused by her own insight. "Merit matters. Experience matters. Proven capability matters. But try articulating that in today's climate and see what happens to your reputation." The man beside her finally looked up. "It's exhausting, isn't it? Having to carefully moderate every word." Victoria smiled with shared understanding. "Exactly. You understand." Marcus's jaw tightened infinitesimally, but his expression remained carefully neutral. Visible anger he had learned through painful experience was a privilege denied to him. His reactions could be weaponized, his frustration could be characterized as aggression. His justified indignation could be labeled as unprofessional. So he remained motionless, observed, waited for the precise moment. The woman in the tech hoodie, her badge read Sarah from a prominent design firm, angled her phone higher, ensuring the camera captured both Victoria's face and the seat number clearly visible above her. A notification illuminated Marcus's phone screen. Twitter. He opened the application. The tweet was already live, posted 3 minutes ago. Currently on Horizon Airways Flight 847. Just watch them remove a black male passenger from first class, seat he reserved a month ago, to accommodate a white female executive. The removed passenger? Air Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Nexus Core Technologies. You know, the company Horizon is signing a $800 million contract with on Monday. He's sitting in 18C now. Attached was a photo. Slightly grainy from cabin lighting, but unmistakably clear. Marcus in row 18, laptop open, expression composed, and visible through the seat gap, Victoria Langford in 1A, champagne glass raised. Marcus stared at his screen. He hadn't anticipated this specific development, hadn't requested documentation, but now that this truth was being broadcast in real time, he felt something fundamental shift in his approach. Not vindication, not yet, but clarity about what came next. Sarah, her Twitter bio identified her as a UX designer and digital rights advocate, was still typing. Another tweet appeared. Ms. Langford is currently on speakerphone explaining how these people don't understand business culture and discussing why diversity initiatives lower standards. I'm recording everything. Full documentation coming. Marcus watched the tweet materialize on his screen, watched the engagement metrics climb. 20 likes, 60, 150. Around him, other passengers were beginning to notice the digital wildfire igniting in real time. A businessman across the aisle leaned toward his colleague, whispering while gesturing toward first class. 3 rows back, someone opened Twitter and began scrolling rapidly. In the galley, James's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at the screen, his face drained of color. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the phone. He turned and walked rapidly toward the cockpit, nearly colliding with Thomas in the narrow space. Thomas grabbed James's arm. "What's wrong?" James showed him the phone screen. Marcus couldn't see the display, but he observed Thomas's reaction, the sudden rigidity in his posture, the way his hand moved involuntarily toward his mouth before he forced it down with visible effort. Thomas looked toward row 18, then toward seat 1A, then back at James. They spoke in urgent whispers, voices too low to hear but body language communicating escalating panic. Another notification. Sarah had posted a second photo, this one capturing Victoria mid-laugh, clearly visible and easily identifiable. The caption, Horizon Airways, priority passenger. Her name tag on the briefcase says Langford. Anyone familiar with her? The replies flooded in within seconds. She's on Horizon's board of directors. This is about to become a massive PR disaster. Someone needs to tag their corporate communications team immediately. Marcus set his phone face down on his tray table. He hadn't initiated this documentation, but he wasn't going to interfere with truth being broadcast either. In first class, Victoria remained completely oblivious to the digital firestorm building around her. She had moved to another voice memo, this one discussing quarterly financial projections and market positioning strategies. Her tone remained relaxed, confident, the voice of someone who had never faced meaningful consequences for her words or actions. Thomas approached her seat, professional mask firmly in place despite the fear visible in his eyes to anyone trained to read micro-expressions. "Ms. Langford, I apologize for the interruption. Could I speak with you privately for just a moment?" Victoria looked up, clearly annoyed. "I'm in the middle of recording important communications." "I understand completely, ma'am, but this is somewhat urgent." She sighed with theatrical exasperation, paused her recording, and followed Thomas to the galley area. Marcus couldn't hear their hushed conversation, but he observed Thomas's body language with clinical precision, apologetic, deferential, increasingly desperate. Victoria's expression transitioned from annoyance to confusion to something harder and more defensive. She glanced back toward the cabin, then at Thomas, then extracted her own phone from her suit pocket. Her face transformed immediately. 3,000 miles away, Diana Westbrook sat in her corner office on the 48th floor of Horizon Airways corporate headquarters. Her executive assistant had departed for the evening. The building had settled into its after-hours quiet. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed their chief communications officer. She considered not answering. "Diana, we have a critical situation developing." The executive's voice carried controlled panic. "Twitter. A passenger on Flight 847 is live documenting what appears to be a discrimination incident. They removed a black male passenger from first class. The passenger is Marcus Reynolds. Diana's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. What did you say? Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Nexus Core Technologies. He's on one of our flights right now, removed from his assigned first-class seat to accommodate Victoria Langford. It's spreading across social media exponentially. We're trending nationally, very negatively. Diana opened her laptop with hands that had begun to shake. The Twitter feed loaded. She saw the photographs, the captions, the replies multiplying exponentially. Her phone vibrated with an incoming email. The subject line made her stomach contract. Protocol Omega, activated. She opened it with mounting dread. Effective immediately. All system access for Horizon Airways suspended pending comprehensive ethics review. AI scheduling platform locked. Route optimization system terminated. Cloud integration frozen. Contract execution halted until corporate leadership addresses documented pattern of discriminatory practices and institutional bias. Marcus Reynolds, CEO, Nexus Core Technologies. Diana stood so abruptly her ergonomic chair rolled backward and struck the floor-to-ceiling window behind her desk. She attempted to call Marcus directly. The call diverted immediately to voicemail, airplane mode. She tried Nexus Core's main line, an automated message. All inquiries regarding Horizon Airways integration should be directed to our Legal and Compliance Department. Normal business hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. She pulled up the operational systems dashboard. Red warning alerts covered every screen. System access denied. Manual override failed. Backup protocols unresponsive. Horizon Airways' entire digital infrastructure had been running in parallel with Nexus Core's cloud platform for the past 7 months, preparing for complete integration. They had already migrated pilot scheduling, real-time fuel optimization, automated baggage routing, and gate coordination to Nexus Core's systems. The legacy infrastructure was being systematically decommissioned. Without Nexus Core's platform, they had nothing functional. Diana grabbed her phone and called Julia Armstrong, their chief technology officer. How severe is this? We're completely locked out. Can't access flight scheduling, can't coordinate crew assignments, can't process baggage routing algorithms. We're approximately 40 minutes from cascading flight delays. If this situation persists beyond 3 hours, we're facing widespread cancellations. If it extends overnight... Julia's voice trailed into silence. Diana didn't need her to complete the thought. Overnight meant operational chaos, grounded aircraft, stranded passengers throughout their network, tens of millions in direct losses, potentially hundreds of millions in long-term reputation damage. She pulled up Flight 847's status, still airborne, landing in 42 minutes. She had 42 minutes to prevent complete catastrophe. Her phone rang again. The board chair. Diana, what the hell is happening? I'm receiving calls from major institutional investors. CNN just picked up the story. Do you comprehend what this will do to our stock price when markets open? Diana closed her eyes. I'm managing the situation. Manage it significantly faster. The line went dead. Back on Flight 847, Thomas returned to the galley where James stood gripping the counter, face ashen. I just received a call from ground operations, Thomas whispered urgently. There's a senior executive team waiting at the gate. They want Mr. Reynolds escorted off first. Full VIP treatment, whatever accommodation he requests. James's voice shook slightly. What about Ms. Langford? Thomas didn't respond. The answer was implicit in his silence. In row 18, Marcus felt his phone vibrate with a new message. Derek Williams, his CFO. Westbrook has been attempting to reach you for 37 minutes. Their operations dashboard is experiencing complete system failure. They know. Marcus typed his response. Good. Let them understand the full scope. He looked toward first class. Victoria had returned to her seat, but her entire demeanor had transformed. The casual ease had evaporated. She sat rigidly, phone gripped in both hands, scrolling with increasing desperation. Every few seconds, she glanced toward the rear of the aircraft, then back at her screen. She understood now. The cabin atmosphere around Marcus had fundamentally shifted. Passengers were no longer pretending discretion. They were watching openly, phones visible, some recording, some tweeting, others simply observing the unfolding drama with the fascinated attention reserved for witnessing consequences in real time. The older black man who had caught Marcus's eye earlier, now revealed as a university professor based on his conference materials, leaned across the aisle. "I hope they're finally paying attention." Marcus met his gaze directly. "They are now." The aircraft began its initial descent. The captain's voice filled the cabin, smooth and oblivious to the crisis unfolding below, announcing their approach and thanking passengers for choosing Horizon Airways. Marcus fastened his seatbelt and opened his laptop one final time during the flight. He pulled up the Nexus Core Horizon Airways contract. $700 million, 9 months of intensive negotiation, thousands of hours of engineering work and system integration. And embedded within the dense legal language, a specific clause he had personally insisted on during the final negotiation round. Either party may terminate this agreement immediately if the other party engages in conduct materially inconsistent with the ethical standards and anti-discrimination policies outlined in Appendix D, Section 4, Equal Treatment and Inclusive Business Practices. Amanda Torres had questioned the clause's necessity. Horizon's legal team had attempted to remove it entirely. Marcus had refused to execute the contract without it. Now he understood why that instinct had been correct. He closed the laptop and looked through the window as the aircraft descended through cloud layers. Below, the city lights spread across the darkness like an illuminated circuit board, ordered, beautiful, indifferent to human dramas. Everything was about to change. The aircraft touched down with a hard bounce. The cabin erupted into motion, overhead bins popping open, passengers reaching for belongings, the familiar shuffle toward exit. Marcus remained seated. He sat in 18C, hands folded, watching the choreography unfold with clinical detachment. Thomas appeared at the front of the cabin, phone pressed to his ear, face reflecting barely controlled panic. James stood beside him, wringing his hands. In seat 1A, Victoria gathered her belongings with excessive speed. The confidence had completely dissolved. She checked her phone compulsively, jaw clenched with tension. The seatbelt sign extinguished. Thomas moved down the aisle, directly toward Marcus. Every passenger watched, phones recording, Sarah capturing everything for her now viral live stream that had surpassed 300,000 viewers. Thomas stopped at row 18, his professional mask completely fractured. "Mr. Reynolds, on behalf of Horizon Airways, I want to offer my sincere apologies. There was a significant misunderstanding regarding your seat assignment. Our ground team is waiting to provide full assistance." Marcus looked up calmly. "A misunderstanding? I should have verified the situation more thoroughly before." "This wasn't an error. It was policy execution." Silence expanded through the cabin. Thomas went visibly pale. "Please, if we could discuss this privately." "Here is perfectly appropriate." Marcus's voice remained level, but with steel underneath the calm. "You explained that first class was reserved for priority passengers. That value determined accommodation. Mr. Langford," he corrected himself deliberately. "Ms. Langford received my seat, reserved a month ago, confirmed 3 times, paid for in full, because of operational priority, discretionary decision-making." He stood, removing his backpack with deliberate care. Every eye in the cabin tracked his movement. "What specific criteria made her priority and me not?" Thomas's hands trembled visibly. "I don't have access to that information." "But I do." Marcus held up his phone. The screen displayed Protocol Omega, activated. System access, terminated. Thomas stared at the screen. 7 months ago, Horizon Airways signed a contract with Nexus Core Technologies to completely modernize your operational infrastructure. Flight scheduling, fuel optimization, baggage routing, crew coordination, everything. $700 million. Integration scheduled to go live Monday morning. Comprehension dawned in Thomas's expression. 3 hours ago, I suspended that integration. All access terminated. AI systems locked. Route optimization offline. Cloud platforms encrypted. Your backup protocols are non-functional because you've already decommissioned them. Thomas's mouth opened. No words emerged. Behind him, Victoria had gone completely still, understanding the full magnitude of what was unfolding. Marcus stepped into the aisle. Passengers pressed back instinctively, phones raised. Your CEO has been attempting to contact me for the past hour. Your operations dashboard is experiencing catastrophic system failure. Your CTO is currently realizing that without Nexus Core's platform, Horizon Airways cannot coordinate a single flight. He moved forward with measured steps. Thomas stumbled backward. You made an assumption about who was sitting in row 18. You failed to understand the actual cost of that assumption. You failed to comprehend what happens when you treat people who look like me as if we're irrelevant. He reached the front of the aircraft. Through the windows, gate area, multiple executives in business attire, faces reflecting urgent concern. Victoria stood, briefcase in hand. Wait, I don't know who you think you... Marcus turned. The look in his eyes stopped her mid-sentence. You don't know who I am. That's precisely the problem. The door opened. 4 executives rushed into the cabin. Leading them, Diana Westbrook, late 50s, perfectly styled silver hair, face flushed with stress. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, I cannot apologize adequately for this situation. This is completely unacceptable and does not represent... Marcus raised one hand. The gesture silenced her. You want to talk? 3 hours ago, your staff informed me I didn't belong in first class, removed me from my assigned seat, gave that seat to Ms. Langford, discretionary priority. Diana's face went ashen. She looked toward Thomas with an expression of pure fury. Explain to everyone here what specific criteria made Ms. Langford priority and me not. Was it frequent flyer status, fare class, corporate relationship, or something else entirely? Around them, passengers remained in the aisle, phones recording. Sarah's live stream had reached 400,000 viewers and climbing. We will conduct a complete investigation. Your employees followed your established policies. Policies you approved and implemented. Discretionary authority that consistently operates in one specific direction. Marcus took a step closer. Diana involuntarily stepped back. 7 discrimination settlements in 24 months. Multiple Department of Transportation complaints. HR reports documenting pattern and practice. The evidence was clear enough that my legal team flagged serious concerns. I ignored those warnings. I believed in partnership and collaborative change. He paused deliberately. I was incorrect in that belief. Diana's hands shook visibly. We can correct this situation. You didn't remove a passenger from first class. You removed your company's operational future. $700 million frozen indefinitely. Critical systems completely disabled. I recommend you check your stock price. Diana extracted her phone with trembling hands. Her face went gray. Marcus turned to address the passengers directly. To Sarah, whose live stream had become a national moment. To the professor with tears in his eyes. This isn't revenge. This is consequence. What happens when systems fail the people they're supposed to serve? When policies enable discrimination through bureaucratic language? When power encounters accountability? Back to Diana. You have 72 hours to demonstrate that Horizon Airways deserves trust. Not my personal trust. The trust of every person who looks like me and has been ignored, dismissed, removed, or humiliated by your systems and policies. He adjusted his backpack on his shoulder, 72 hours. Then this contract terminates permanently. You can explain to your board of directors why Horizon Airways lost $700 million because your staff couldn't see past the color of my skin. Marcus walked past Diana, through the jet bridge, into the terminal. Behind him, the cabin remained frozen in absolute silence. Sarah whispered into her live stream, "Holy shit." The words echoed through 500,000 screens across the country. Then, slowly, deliberately, passengers began to applaud. The 72 hours that followed moved with brutal efficiency. Horizon's stock declined 14% in after-hours trading. By market open, another 9%. Institutional investors demanded emergency briefings. The FAA opened a formal inquiry into discriminatory practices. The pilots' union released a statement about systemic cultural failures. Diana's hastily arranged press conference became a case study in corporate crisis mismanagement. Voice shaking, she apologized for the incident and promised thorough review of procedures. When a reporter asked her to name a single executive of color in Horizon's C-suite, she hesitated 7 seconds too long, a pause that became its own viral clip. When pressed about whether she had personally approved Victoria's seat reassignment, she deflected with corporate language that satisfied no one. Thomas gave an interview to a major news outlet, visibly emotional, insisting he had simply followed established protocols. "We were instructed to accommodate VIP passengers. I didn't know who Mr. Reynolds was." The interviewer pressed, "Should it matter who he was?" Thomas had no answer. Victoria released a carefully crafted statement, claiming her words had been taken out of context and expressing deep respect for diversity and inclusion. Sarah posted the complete unedited audio, 14 minutes of continuous recording. Victoria's attorney stopped returning media calls. 4 days later, Horizon's newly created Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, a position that hadn't existed 70 hours earlier, submitted a formal proposal to Nexus Corps. The document was comprehensive: mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff, independent third-party audit of all discrimination complaints, complete overhaul of VIP accommodation policies, establishment of a passenger advocacy board with seats reserved for community representatives and civil rights organizations. Not perfect, but substantive enough to warrant consideration. Marcus reviewed the proposal with his executive team during a late-night conference call. "It reads like they actually hired consultants who know what they're doing," Amanda Torres observed. "The accountability mechanisms are real. The timeline is aggressive but achievable. The oversight structure has teeth." Derek Williams added, "The financial penalties for non-compliance are significant. They're putting actual money behind these commitments." Marcus made his decision. He called Diana directly. "I've reviewed your proposal." Diana's voice sounded exhausted. "And it's a starting point. But I want quarterly reports with verified data. Third-party auditing firm of my selection. If a single complaint emerges suggesting this was performative rather than transformative, we terminate immediately, permanently, no second chances." "You have my commitment." "I don't want your commitment. I want your resignation, in writing, signed by the full board, if these systems fail. Your personal accountability." Silence stretched across the line. Then, "You'll have it by end of business today." Marcus reinstated system access 70 hours after the suspension. Flights resumed normal operations. Stock prices began recovering, though market analysts predicted years of brand rehabilitation. Victoria Langford faced consequences that extended far beyond employment termination. Marcus's civil lawsuit revealed patterns spanning her entire career: emails, performance reviews, testimony from former colleagues describing consistent discriminatory behavior. The case settled for $850,000, with a specific stipulation. Victoria was permanently barred from serving on any corporate board in the aviation industry. Every future job application would be accompanied by Google search results, beginning with her name and ending with discrimination lawsuit. Her professional reputation was finished. Thomas and James found new positions. Thomas at a regional carrier in a non-supervisory role, James in hotel hospitality, both on probationary status, neither in positions of authority over other people. Sarah received an offer from Nexus Corps 4 weeks after the incident. New position, Director of Technology Ethics and User Advocacy. Her first project, developing an open-source platform for documenting and tracking discrimination incidents across corporate environments with verified data integration and pattern recognition algorithms. A journalist asked Marcus why he had hired someone with no traditional tech background. He smiled slightly. She witnessed injustice and refused to look away. She documented truth when silence would have been easier. That's exactly the perspective I want shaping our technology. Horizon launched a scholarship program for students of color pursuing careers in aviation, $3.2 million annually, funded by executive compensation reductions. Marcus had explicitly refused any direct financial compensation, insisting the money create structural change rather than personal settlement. 8 months later, Horizon and Nexus Corps held a joint press conference announcing successful completion of the system integration. The partnership had survived, fundamentally reshaped by consequence and accountability. But Marcus never flew Horizon again. Not from spite, not from anger, but because some bridges once burned reveal what should have been built in their place from the beginning. 6 weeks after the incident, Marcus sat across from a podcast host in a professionally lit studio. Voices That Matter reached 800,000 listeners weekly. The host leaned forward. Many people have characterized what you did as revenge. Justified revenge, perhaps, but revenge nonetheless. How do you respond to that? Marcus paused, considering his words carefully. Not revenge. Consequences. There's a fundamental difference. Explain that distinction. Revenge is personal and emotional, making someone experience your pain. Consequences are structural and systematic, ensuring that pain stops, not just for you, but for everyone who comes after you. His voice remained steady. I wasn't thinking about Victoria's humiliation or Diana's stock price. I was thinking about the next black man in first class, the next person told they don't belong in space they've paid for. Whether I could actually change the system that enables this behavior. Did you succeed in changing it? A slight smile. Systems don't transform overnight. Horizon implemented new policies, created oversight positions, established quarterly audits. That's progress. But genuine change takes years and requires people consistently refusing to accept that's just how things are. Critics argue you leveraged privilege, wealth, corporate power to achieve justice that most people can't access. They're completely correct. I had extraordinary leverage that most passengers don't possess. $700 million suspended with a single email. Most people removed from their seats can't do that. They file complaints that get ignored. They swallow humiliation because fighting costs more than they can afford. He paused deliberately. That's precisely why I had to act. Not just for myself, but because I could. I had resources, platform, and power to make them listen. If I had remained silent, accepted seat 18C without consequence, I would have been complicit in perpetuating the system. What should people take away from your experience? Marcus looked directly into the camera. Dignity isn't negotiable. Your inherent worth doesn't depend on others recognizing it. When you have power, any kind of power, even if it's just a phone that can record truth, you have responsibility to use that power for something larger than yourself. He thought about Sarah, about the professor who had tears in his eyes, about the passengers who had applauded. Every person on that aircraft made a choice. Document the truth, speak up, or support the narrative that I was the problem. Those individual choices collectively determine whether the next person faces discrimination alone or surrounded by witnesses saying, "This isn't acceptable." You're still working with Horizon Airways? Walking away would have been significantly easier. It wouldn't have changed anything systematically. staying engaged, maintaining accountability, forcing genuine institutional change that's harder but more sustainable than performative gestures. The interview concluded. The episode generated 400,000 downloads in its first week. But what Marcus thought about most was the email that arrived that morning from a young black man starting his first corporate position, terrified of not belonging, asking for advice. Marcus had written back, "You belong." Not because someone granted permission, but because you claimed the space you deserve. Their doubt reveals everything about them and nothing about your actual value. That was the real work, not headlines, not settlements, not viral moments, individual instances when someone like him decided they deserved space and refused to apologize for occupying it. Have you ever witnessed injustice and chosen silence? Most of us have. We tell ourselves it's not our situation, not our fight. Speaking up costs more than staying quiet. Sarah didn't accept that calculus. She was just a passenger. Designer heading home after a conference. She could have replaced her headphones, scrolled through her feed, pretended not to see what was unfolding 3 rows ahead. She chose differently, pulled out her phone, started recording, began live streaming, not expecting it to go viral, but because remaining silent felt like participating in injustice. And participation, even passive participation, is a choice. That choice changed everything, not just for Marcus, not just for Horizon Airways, but for the 2 million people who watched. For passengers who saw her courage and found their own, for every person who has been told they don't belong and wondered if anyone notices or cares. You possess that same power. Maybe you can't suspend $700 million with one email. You don't have a platform, executive title, or corner office, but you have a phone. You have a voice. You have the ability to witness, document, and refuse to look away. That's not insignificant. That's fundamental. Systems change because ordinary people, like Sarah, like you, refuse to let injustice hide in plain sight. Don't wait for someone with more authority. Don't convince yourself it's not your responsibility. Speak up. Record truth. File reports. Refuse complicit silence. Use whatever power you have, even when it feels impossibly small, because small acts of courage compound into movements. Here's what they don't want you remembering. The person you're dismissing, underestimating, treating as invisible, they might be holding your future in their hands. The man told to move to the back of the plane might be the CEO whose contract sustains your company's operations. The overlooked candidate might disrupt your entire industry. The silenced voice might have saved you from catastrophic blindness. Before you judge someone by appearance, accent, or skin color, do you actually know who you're dealing with? Marcus sat in seat 18C and allowed them to believe they had won. Watched them celebrate their small cruelty, their casual disregard for his humanity. Then he showed them what power looks like when exercised with precision, patience, and purpose. You don't need to be a CEO. You just need to refuse complicity. Stand up, speak out, document truth. When you witness someone being treated as if they don't matter, make Sarah's choice. Choose to see them. Choose to record. Choose to care. Justice doesn't arrive spontaneously. It's built brick by people deciding, in specific moments, that dignity matters more than personal comfort. Remember Marcus in seat 18C. And remember, the person you underestimate today might determine your entire tomorrow. You have more power than you think. Use it.